This is a video that I'm literally like so excited to talk about because African mythology changed my life and I'm so excited to just like put you on. My name is Zai. I am a storyteller, author, content creator, all this everything. I'm a multi-hyphenate. In 2021, I discovered African mythology fantasy. It is the term that I use. It's more of like an umbrella term to talk about all of the mythologies and legends that are from the continent, right? So if you know the mythology from the specific country, you know, that you're referring from, just use that. Just use that. That's better. It's better. How I discovered it because it was in a very unique way and in a way that kind of like swept into my life. And I also want to say disclaimer that it, like I say mythology, but a lot of these myths and legends are actually religion and cultures, and people still apply it. For example, like there is Nigerian Yoruba religion, which has the pantheon of Orishas, and Orishas are very much real, and it's very much a religion that people like abide to, and it's a beautiful way of life. But this is not what this video is about. We're gonna focus on the fantastical aspect of things. So starting with Nigerian Yoruba religion, there is a whole pantheon of the Orishas. So the Orishas are like, they're not considered specifically as like deities or gods. You don't use the word deities or gods to basically like describe them. And I learned that because like, yes, I did start discovering African mythology in 2021 with Children of Blood and Bone, the Gilded Ones, Ray Bearer. As I got more into it, I also got more into African spirituality. And again, I'm talking about the fantastical aspect of things. Because for me, my spiritual practice is very like private, and I don't really want to talk about it, if that makes sense. So, Nigerian Yoruba religions, we have like various different types of Orishas. The Orishas are like forces of nature. You know, they rule over elements. You have Yemaya, who is basically, if we're doing a little comparison with Greek mythology, Yemaya is kind of um like Poseidon. No, she governs, like she's like a mix between Poseidon and Hera. Am I pronouncing it right? I think, yeah. So she, obviously she is nothing like them, and they actually cannot be compared. But just so you can actually find yourself and in terms of like learning about her. So she governs like the oceans and stuff like that, and she is like the mother Orisha, you know. So she has like a very like nurturing energy. Her color is blue, you know. And then we have Oya, and Oya is like the Orisha storms of big changes, of transformation. She actually appears in Children of Blood and Bone by Tommy Adeyemi throughout the whole series. Um, and then we have Oshun. Oshun, very much like Oshun is the one, the Orisha that governs rivers, sweet waters, sensuality, love, you know? I guess you can kind of like compare her to like Aphrodite, if that makes sense. In something that I really say, because I'm filming this on in Women International Women's Day, and if I'm on my Zoom, I will be posting this the day of filming this. But what I read a lot in one of the spiritual books that I read, the Calabash of Cowries, which is a really really good book. It talks about how Yemaya, Oshun, and Oya actually form some sort of like sisterhood, you know? And it's kind of like if you see all three of them together, one is like the fun little sister, kind of very fun and just like always dancing, and that's like Oshun. And then one is the more like serious, rebellious one, that is Oya, and one is kind of like the moral compass of the group, and that's Yemaya. Now, in other spiritual books that I've read, sometimes they described those three Orishas as kind of like being pit against each other and being enemies, which the first time that I read about it, I really didn't like it. And to be very honest with you, not a lot of fantasy books actually dive deep in all three of them at the same time. So you have Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowen, where Yemaya has a very big role in that one, and that is about a mami wata. And mami wata is basically like a mermaid siren type of creature throughout the whole of Africa. Like she's actually in every single African country, which I find is kind of like, it's very cool. It just goes to show how much we're so connected in the continent. Because in West Africa, like in my country, Guinea, Mami Wata is seen as like this alluring mermaid that is very beautiful. In some other countries, she's seen as like dangerous and like a predator. So it's so interesting to see how each like country has like a different notion of her. But in the Skin of the Sea, the author basically what she did, like there had been legends about Yemaya, right? That she wasn't always the Orisha that was governing over oceans. Like once she heard about the slave trade and all these things happening, she decided to go over the ocean to rescue. And that's how she became the Orisha that was governing over the oceans. So what the author did in Skin of the Sea, which was really freaking cool, was basically like put like Yemaya and her whole role is about saving the people who die in the ocean from the slave trade, but taking their souls back to the motherland, if that makes sense. Basically, the Mamiwatas, so all the mermaids and sirens and whatnot, they were tasked with like taking the souls of the deceased and taking them back to the specific island. But there is one Mamiwata who did not do that, and instead she actually saved a man that was still alive, and that is like how the adventure starts. And then in Children of Blood and Bone, Oya is like this, almost like this deity that watches over the main protagonist. She doesn't always come as like an actual form, but more as like an energy in some sort of way. And then, oh my god, I actually have never read a book that talks about Oshun in like in a fantasy books. What? Yeah, I mean, yet also a book that that talks about, like, I think it might be talking about Oshun but more in like a modern fantasy, urban fantasy type of way, because a lot of the books like Children of Blood and Bone, Ray Bearer, The Gilded Ones, Firstborn of the Sun, you know, talk about African mythology and sometimes like the Orishas, like the pantheon of the Orishas, but more like as like energies rather than actual deities, like the way that Percy Jackson, for example, like talks about it, if that makes sense. So when I stumbled upon African mythology, I was in a 3-year reading slump, which is freaking crazy to talk about. And I think there's so many layers to it, because I think I fell into that reading slump because I did not see myself represented anymore. So I was kind of like, okay, fine, I'm not reading anymore. No, subconsciously, I think that's what happened in my brain. And then I remember 2021, I was in a really bad place. I had been moving places to places. Like, I was moving back to London after like the pandemic and stuff like that. And I had been fired from a job because I posted a TikTok. That's a whole other story. And I remember going to a Waterstones, which is like the equivalent of Barnes and Nobles in the UK. And I went to this white lady, bear in mind, and I told her, give me black fantasy. The woman didn't actually, I really have to give like blessings upon this woman. Whoever you are, whatever you are, I'm sending you good vibes. She did not flinch, because sometimes, you know, I remember my sister told me, because I was born and raised in Belgium. And I remember my sister told me, like, oh yeah, like I went to Belgium and I wanted to buy you like a black fantasy book. And I went in there and I asked specifically for that. And the woman looked at me weird. And I was just like, why would you look at someone weird if they're looking for a specific type of book? Like, anyways, so I, you know, this woman like just embraced my demand. Like, she didn't make me feel weird about it, or like I was, you know, like someone weird or whatever. She was like, I got you. And then that's how she recommended all of these books to me. And then, you know, Children of Blood and Bone, and also Legendborn. But Legendborn is more like talking about rootcraft. It's another thing on its own. Like, rootcraft is very much a spiritual practice that people still do in present, like modern day. Like, same for Nigerian Yoruba religions and the Orishas and hoodoo and voodoo. But like I said, that's African spirituality. That's like the whole other realm. Anyways, so I started reading all of these like African mythology fantasy books, and like honestly, like it changed my life. It changed my life because in 2020, like one of my mom's friend told me to write a book after my dad died, and I thought it was gonna be like some sort of like autobiography and like something inspirational, because I've always been that person that motivates people and stuff like that. So 2021 was just like falling upon this whole world of black representation in books that I never grew up with. And I was like 21 at that time, turning 22. So it was such a game changer for me. And then also another like deity, like folklore that a lot of people are familiar with is Anansi. Now I can actually make like depending on like the deities and legends that you're really interested about, I can make a whole dedicated video on it. But like Anansi, for example, is comes from Ghana, and it's like a trickster god in a type of way. But the way that I have explored him and read about him is in the book Beast of Prey by Ayana Gray. And he is like a trickster god, but more of like a god watching over things and like watching over people and stuff like that, and like more like a guiding force in some sort of way, and less of a trickster, but actually kind of like bleeding onto movies and TV shows. Sinners, the movie Sinners, actually has so many African spirituality. For example, with the character Annie, she is an Ifa priestess, which is basically linked to African spirituality, one of the branches of African spirituality. That's a whole other thing. And I keep on coming back to it because I feel like you cannot talk about African mythology without talking about African spirituality, because the two are interlinked. African mythology is more talking about fantasy books, and African spirituality is talking about the actual real practices that real people do, you know? So another TV show that I'm actually thinking about is called Mortel, which actually I think this one has the Orisha Eshu or Elegua, one of the two. I think it's Eshu, who is a trickster god. But in that TV show, like it was really cool to be able to see like African mythology in that show in a more like urban, modern fantasy type of way. But I feel like I don't like it when people kind of like, oh, when media and literature portray like trickster gods as like being the bad guys and being the villains. Because I don't think that's what they are. There's so much more complex and deeper than that, and I think that's something that should be explored. So like in 2024, I decided to write like a middle grade African mythology fantasy, which was, after the 4 years of that one friend of my mom telling me to write a book. I think it was time. It was time. I met Tommy Adeyemi, the author of Children of Blood and Bone, who gave me so many amazing advice. And then I took all of her advice and basically started like doing the whole plot for the half of like 2024, the whole of 2025, and the end of 2025. I started writing my first draft, and I just finished my first draft. And actually, in my middle grade African mythology fantasy, which by the way is called The Princess and the Dark, and it's basically if Sailor Moon and Percy Jackson had a baby together, and it's about a 12-year-old black girl who dreams of the goddess Isis from Egyptian mythology. Basically, the goddess comes into her dream and is like, "Girl, you gotta save the world, otherwise we're all gonna die." And she has to team up with those two girls that she doesn't even know, travel through a portal through a whole other world. Anyways, I'm not gonna spoil it to you because you're gonna read it. But in that book, I'm very much exploring all of these deities, Nigerian Yoruba religion, Guinean mythology, which is where I'm from. And no one has ever actually talked about Guinean mythology, which is super interesting when you think about it. And I'm mixing in a little bit from mythology as well from Mali, because the people of Mali, indigenous tribes in Mali, actually have a lot of like practices, spiritual practices with the stars and astronomy, which is so fascinating to me. So, I incorporated that as well. I put Egyptian mythology as well in there because I'm from Egypt and I really wanted to be able to see a fictional fantasy story that represents like the deities and the gods in the way that I have come to know them. So in a way where they are very much like connected to your daily life and you come to them for guidance. And in the way that like in Percy Jackson, the gods are not always there, but they're kind of like supporting characters like that you can see and they can speak, and not like just like an energy that is being that someone is coming to, you know, like the way that it is in Children of Blood and Bone, even though it's like done like amazingly well and I love it. I wanted to have more like the gods and the deities and the Orishas actually being there, you know, and they're being more and more introduced as the books go on by. But yeah, I very much grew up as a kid that was labeled too much. You know, people were just like, "Oh my god, Zai, you're doing too much. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that?" And for such a long time, it waited on me to be labeled too much, and I rejected myself, and I felt embarrassed, and I felt ashamed of who I was because of that. And so when I wrote my book, I was like, this is a coming of age story, a story of reclaiming back your power and being like, no, you're not too much. And I very much see The Princess in the Dark, my book, being one that is read with the whole family, being one read by people who want to rediscover that part of themselves, that inner teenager in some sort of way, being a book that is being read at schools and where people are like picking it apart with like the mythologies and the legends and then relaying it back to actual cultural practices and folklore, you know. I That's how I see it. You know, it is a book for the people who have been deemed too much. It is the people who have lost themselves. It is for the kids who, you know, Billie Eilish said, you're in middle grade, you feel so many emotions. And like adults would come to you and be like, oh my God, no, it's not that deep. No, you're like, they would come to you and validate how you feel. And I very much just have the intention with this book to write something that validates your emotions and no, you're not too much, and yes, you are amazing and you're special. That is very much what The Princess in the Dark is all about. And I'm actually, because I know you're watching this video, so you're obviously a nerd just like me. So I included a free mythology breakdown. I actually included a video workshop, a beginner African mythology guide, a reading challenge with Black authors, and yeah. Because I just wanted to spoil people. I was like, you know, for everyone who pre-orders my book, you get all of that because I want you to be able to have like a whole journey with it, with this book and all of the other books you're going to discover in the realm of African mythology. And because I believe we can all win. We can all win. And what else? And I also included a Discord so we can yap about the book. You know, because sometimes people pre-order books and then it's like, okay, I completely forgot I ordered this book, and then it arrives, and then you're like, oh my god, yeah, I did order this book. So I wanted to have a Discord so we can all get excited. I can share updates and thoughts and stuff like that. Free resources that I include for everyone who pre-orders will be limited. It's not gonna be there forever. So grab it while you can, and I will see you for the next video. Bye.